Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Aaron Davis, and I'll be presenting Going Beyond the Workshop Crowd, Engaging Participants in the Neuroscience Optimized Virtual Environments Living Lab during COVID-19 on behalf of myself, Dr. Ruby Lipson-Smith, and Professor Julie Bernhardt. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we meet on the traditional custodians of country across Australia and that we respect their connection to land, sea and community. I in particular today am on Kaurna land and pay my respect to elders past and present and extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are here today. This presentation is in three parts, beginning with an overview of the NOVELL project, the Neuroscience Optimized Virtual Environments Living Lab, then talk about the specifics of how the lab operated during COVID-19 before moving on to some lessons learnt, which are the findings from a value network analysis process. So to begin with, the NOVELL project. NOVELL is about bringing evidence-based design to stroke rehabilitation. So evidence-based design is about uncovering scientific evidence about the impact of physical space and using that to inform the way that we are designing, in this case, hospital environments. So stroke rehabilitation environments, we know a few things about them. We know that patients are often inactive and alone. We know that boredom, fatigue and depression are very common. We know that engagement and motivation are very important. We know that rehabilitation facilities are very much not purpose-built and have been adapted based on a range of past conditions. And we know that there is a lack of innovation in research in rehab design. So these things led Professor Bernhardt and the team to establish the NOVELL project. NOVELL brings together this understanding that healthcare environments are very complex. So we need to combine place with people and process. Now, the Stroke Foundation does a great job of understanding the needs of people. The Australasian Health Facility Design Guidelines generally deal with place. And there's not a lot of evidence yet about process, but this is something that is being worked on in NOVELL. But what we're really trying to do is to bring these three elements together so that in the Living Lab, we can look at the interactions between people, place, and process. Now, there are some common problems in terms of stroke research, but this is probably relevant for any living lab research, that as we're going through our cycles of design, build, and research, we need a lot of money. There are many stakeholders who are involved or associated with the kinds of environments that we're looking at building. There are contested priorities between, for example, the need for safety and the need for people to feel as though they can extend themselves. And there are a lot of information silos where information is held by one particular discipline or another. So the NOVELL redesign project is aiming to create strong partnerships between government actors, healthcare practitioners and industry, academia, and also broader society. We are hoping to develop technology, education, and research opportunities and generate a new and rigorous design process guided by a living lab framework that can be used not only for designing rehabilitation environments, but a whole range of healthcare or other environments as well, based on this notion of design science. And finally, we're hoping to optimize stroke rehabilitation through research and design practice. The NOVELL team is quite large. So we have team members from the Florey Institute, which is based at the University of Melbourne, of which I am part. But we also have team members from Griffith University with Heidi Zeman, Swinburne University with Marcus White, Dalarna or Chalmers University with Marie Elf, and a range of other key participants as well, including Maria Crotty from Flinders University. As well as our academic team members, we also have a strong existing partnership with STH and are hoping to bring on some more industry partners as well as we do continue the lab forwards. Now, Novel fits in the living lab world between the technically oriented living lab and the socially oriented living lab. So, there are elements of the Novel project that do look at quantifying user behavior and quantifying the experience of people within stroke rehabilitation environments. So, mapping the journey through a stroke rehab experience is one example of this. But then we have another part of the project which is focusing on treating our users as partners and co-researchers throughout the process. So this is where we very much align with the socially oriented living lab idea put forward by Franz. Now, bringing these two things together is quite complicated and requires a lot of negotiation and a lot of collaboration between different members of our teams. But it's really exciting when we begin to see how the socially oriented elements of the lab support the technically oriented and vice versa. So, as with just about everybody in the world, during COVID-19, we did have to adapt the way that we were working. While we were working through the rollout of our first stage of the novel redesign project, I was also part of a team based at the University of South Australia and Sheffield Hallam University that were looking at different spatiotemporal models of doing co-design. And these two figures here have recently been published in the Strategic Design Research Journal. You'll find a link to that one there. What we were looking at is that traditional co-design practice is focused on bringing people together at the same time in the same space. But with COVID-19, as you can see in this diagram, we weren't able to do that. So a lot of work in this area went to same time different space models of collaboration where we were bringing people together over Zoom or other video conferencing technologies and having very much the same or trying to synthesize the same workshop experience that we would have face to face, but doing it through a Zoom based environment. Down this other side are two alternate models for engaging with people, where we're looking at engaging with people in different time and different spaces, and at different times in the same space. So, across our plan for the first stage of the novel redesign project, we looked at our 4 workshops that we were going to conduct and identified opportunities for allowing people to participate in a range of different ways. So, the main workshop session we ran in the same time, different space model, so a Zoom based workshop. But we also incorporated elements where we could allow people to participate in their own time and in their own space. We ran our workshops, as I said, on Zoom, but also used Miro boards as a shared collaborative space to allow all of our participants to collaboratively document the findings. And we also used Mentimeter at times. So what this did in terms of the traditional workshop format that we might be familiar with is we use Zoom to have both our large group discussions and our small, more intimate team-based discussions. We use Miro as a shared tabletop and a shared surface for us to work with. And then we used Mentimeter for sharing at a larger scale. So allowing people to share back with the whole group or hosting more complex large group discussions. One of the important things about this, though, is that we found opportunities to do things in our workshops that we wouldn't have been able to do face to face. So, this is where Miro sits off the pictures of our traditional workshops because it was opening up new opportunities for us as well. So we have, as I said, just completed our 4th workshop where we were engaging with a range of stroke survivors as well as design practitioners and healthcare practitioners. And we're now moving forward into a co-analysis process and into beginning some design prototyping and testing. In order to give you a bit of a sense of what our workshops looked like, I've just included a short video here so that you can see some of the activity that does go on in our workshop sessions. So I'll play that one for you now. As you can see, quite a complex process with a lot of things going on. This is a compressed version of one of our workshops where this activity took place over 2.5 hours. So moving forward to our lessons learned now. These lessons learned have been drawn from a value network analysis, which you can read more about in Werner R. Lee's work, ALEE. But value network analysis is about the exchanges that take place within a network that are not monetary and are not necessarily physical transactions. So when going through this process, we analyze 4 key stakeholder groups. So we have our stroke survivors, we have our facilitators, we have our healthcare professionals, and our designers and architects. We look at the exchanges between each of these different stakeholder groups, as well as the relationship between these stakeholder groups and the broader project that they were a part of. So you can see each of these arrows we have explored with each of our stakeholder groups. The key lessons in terms of the broad project. Firstly, the digital environment was generally very successful, and a lot of people were very impressed by the ability to conduct a national workshop and have a national conversation, which we don't normally get to do. A few people pointed out that we were missing the cup of tea conversation. So, that really important part of working together where we have informal collaborations. But there was some indication that professional networking, connections, new insights, new ideas, new perspectives were coming through, particularly for our professional participants. We did find that in a digital environment, participants found balancing abstraction with concrete outcomes very challenging. This was more challenging than we would have expected in a face to face environment. And then we were a little bit surprised to find a lot of people seeing the opportunity to participate in good engagement as being of tremendous value for them. So something we perhaps could aim to continue to grow within Living Labs is the opportunity to set the benchmark for how interdisciplinary collaboration and how engagement should be happening more generally as well. But then this final point is that more work is needed to build a community of practice that can engage in living lab processes. The shift from reflective and objective contributions to generative contributions, where we are encouraging people to contribute their ideas, not just their experiences, was definitely something that we did notice that we need to build the competency within our general population a little more for. In terms of vulnerable participants, it was easier to attend digitally in terms of mobility, energy, cognitive load, all kinds of ways. The digital platform and processes did need to be designed for accessibility, and we worked quite closely with our stakeholders on this. We found it was very important to build a one-to-one relationship before the workshop. So we didn't just bring vulnerable participants straight into a digital workshop environment. And there was a need for technology assistance and reassurance. So we provided quite in-depth training in advance of the workshop with some YouTube tutorials, briefing packs, and opportunities to receive one-on-one assistance as well. We also found that it was not a silver bullet and can fall apart just as quickly as face to face engagement. So, digital doesn't solve everything. And as an aside, we would also recommend anybody doing digital engagement with vulnerable participants think about engaging in some remote grief counselling training, depending on the kinds of participant groups you are working with. In terms of the spatiotemporal models of co-design, we obviously focused on the same time, different space, but then we did have opportunities where that bled out into the different time, different space, and one instance of where we were bringing different people into our space at different times as well. So we were able to demonstrate that the assemblage of these practices, the assemblage of these models worked really well together. In terms of the asynchronous participation, it did open participation to people who may not be able to participate in a live workshop session. So, for example, we were able to engage with people with aphasia, which is a communication difficulty. It also allowed those people who struggled during the workshop to come back and revisit the workshop and add their contributions at a later time. It seemed to be more attractive to end user participants than professional participants. So, professionals generally wanted to block out an amount of time in their calendar and then participate from a start time to an end time, and that was it. Whereas our end user participants seemed to be more happy to come back later and continue to add more bits and pieces to the workshop. And again, it's not a silver bullet, but it was a useful addition to the Living Lab toolkit in terms of remote and proximate versions. So remote being completely asynchronous and proximate here referring to an hour or two after the workshop. In terms of digital workshops, time and preparation, we need a lot more time to prepare a digital workshop than a face-to-face workshop. And the high quality briefing materials became incredibly important to all of our stakeholder groups. It was very difficult to maintain energy, so it's important to have good facilitation and strong energy among the group. The geographic dispersal and time zone differences were important to consider, but the geographic dispersal became a really strong selling point for this model. And it really helped people to become excited about the fact that this was a national project. The digital technology in terms of data capture and analysis was a lot easier than an analog workshop because we were able to export straight out of the Miro boards into CSV files. And in terms of scale, we can scale participation a lot easier, particularly once we are engaging in these asynchronous forms of engagement. So I'm hoping that has given you a bit of a taste of what the Neuroscience Optimized Virtual Environments Living Lab, or novel redesign, is all about, and also some insights into how we approached engagement during COVID, and how we are hoping to bring this project forward, well, continuing to take the best parts of digital engagement, hopefully bringing in some elements of face-to-face engagement as well. So thank you very much for listening to this presentation.